This is Carver Pike. He's a horror author. And do you have any other accolades you want me to talk about with you?
No, man, just extreme horror, splatterpunk. Right now, I'm nominated. I guess it's my second Splatterpunk Award I'm nominated for right now. But pretty much that's it. I'm got my own YouTube show going on and podcast. I'm part of the Written and Read podcast with Daniel Volpe, which I know you interviewed recently.
Yeah,
And
yeah. How's that going?
Aaron Beauregard and Roland Bursey Jr. It's going good, man. We've been doing it for just a little over a year now.
Okay.
And, going really well. So, yeah.
The response has been good. Is it mainly the authors, people interested in the genre?
Yeah, well, it started out. We started out talking about just the indie horror author world and the ins and outs, and just kind of talking to newer authors and explaining our processes and stuff like that. And that went on probably for close to the first year, and then we've just gotten to where we're bringing on other authors and doing interviews and stuff like that. So,
okay, good deal. Where do you put that? You put that on YouTube, Spotify, like where it can be?
Yeah, the podcast part of it can be listened to pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, like all the usual places, Spotify, Apple. I don't know, all the shit. Aaron puts that shit up. I don't know. I know the video part of it is on YouTube. So podcast wise, it's all the usual places.
All right, cool. Yeah, so your main thing right now is writing books, and you do the podcast a little bit on the side. Do you have another job that you work as well, or are you a full-time author?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the full-time author thing. I'm close. I still do some part-time work. I edit videos for a software company, so I do the voiceover work and basically teach people how to use the software company's software. So that's what I do part-time here from home.
Working in a cubicle, 9 to 5.
No, I've done that. I've done the teaching thing. I'm ex-military. I've done a shit ton of jobs. Really, I lived in a foreign country, in the country of Panama, for 10 years.
Oh wow!
And yeah.
What branch were you of the military?
Air Force.
Okay.
So yeah, Air Force.
Yeah. I remember there was a war in Panama. My dad would bring us back stuff. Like he was in every war from the first Vietnam War from the Vietnam War through the first Gulf War, and he'd always bring us back stuff. And we go to like gun shows and stuff and try and sell like belts and hats and whatever, and buy what we thought at the time were cool.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Good memories, huh?
Yeah, well, those are the good memories. I have plenty of bad memories too, but we won't even talk about that.
Yeah.
All day. But all right, so how long have you been putting out your stuff?
Well, I've been writing not full time, but really writing, taking it seriously since about 2015. But I started out in erotica, really. So actually, no, I take that back. I started out writing dark fantasy, but it wasn't really going anywhere at first. And then a friend suggested I try erotica because that was kind of the thing, when 50 Shades of Grey came out and all that shit. So I kind of tried erotica just for fun at first, and then started to do fairly well with it. So that's kind of where my focus was for a while. And then I tried to publish horror under it, because horror is really where my passion's always been, horror and dark fantasy. And so I was really just doing erotica for the money, really, and just kind of for the fun of it. And I tried to publish horror. Some of it, yeah. There was kind of a dark twist to some of it, but then that's where I tried to put the horror in under that erotic pen name.
Right.
And put an erotic twist with it, which is where I kind of started calling it erotic horror. But it wasn't. It's really hard to blend those. It's not hard to blend the genres because I think sex and horror kind of go naturally together. I mean, shit. Look at fucking Friday the 13th. I mean,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, they're all like morality plays. Like you smoke a little weed, you have a little sex, suddenly you're dead.
Exactly. So I mean, they kind of go naturally together, but trying to sell horror to an erotic audience doesn't work that well. So at some point I just decided to separate them, and then focused on the Carver Pike pen name and really started to focus on horror.
So when it was erotica, you had a pen name for that, but it wasn't Carver Pike?
Right. No, I still have the pen name Chris Genovese, under with my erotica stuff, and then I started writing
watch all that
under
shit's
Carver
gonna
Pike.
blow up.
Well, then I even started in the middle. I really didn't like writing the kind of, because a lot of my erotica was like almost erotic comedy and stuff like that. It was more of a lighter kind of erotica. And then I really wanted to write like the Sons of Anarchy type of stuff, like the MC Motorcycle Club stuff and Mafia, and like a darker suspense kind of erotic, kind of romantic suspense type stuff. So I created CM Genovese. So technically I have 3 pen names, and CM Genovese is right in the middle. So when I'm not writing horror now, I'll kind of go back to CM Genovese, and it is almost horror for like it's very violent motorcycle club or organized crime type of romance with with a little bit of horror mixed in there. So I do kind of cheat and put a little horror in there. So that's kind of my in between.
Kind of your go-to. Do you have a kind of a like a specification like of a subgenre that you prefer, like, you know, kind of fucked up people doing crazy stuff, or supernatural, or, you know, or like some people really focus on like really just like The Exorcist and stuff like that? Like what's your go-to?
I don't really have one, man, to be honest. If you look at my horror work, like I have a 5-book series called Diablo Snuff, and it's most of that is about an evil organization that's just kind of trying to take over the world. And each book in that series is totally different. It's really just about this evil, sinister organization that's just really fucked up. And every book is totally different in it. But
are they all kind of
then I had, what's that?
Are they all a series? Like they like one's a sequel to another one?
Yeah, kind of, but the first 4 books in the series you can really read in any order, as long as you read the last book called The Maddening last. And so the others, it doesn't really matter. You can read them in any order as long as you read the last one last, because it does touch on all the other books and all the characters, and it kind of brings them all back in and stuff like that. So, but then you've got, like, I have a book called Scalp that's about parasitic head lice. I have Grad Night, which is it touches on that Diablo Snuff world.
Have you seen that movie Rubber?
No, but I know which one you're talking about. Is that the one? Is that the one with the tire?
Tire, yeah.
No, I know you're. Yeah, I've seen the trailer and shit for it, but I've never actually seen it.
It's bad. It's really bad. I've watched a lot of bad movies, and that would be one of the top ones. Yeah. Like, not even funny bad. Like, what's that one with the zombie sheep, like Black Sheep?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that was funny bad, but it was still like I enjoyed the movie. Tires just it's a chore to get through it.
Every time I see like a trailer, I'm like, it doesn't even seem like a real movie. It almost just seems like a joke trailer, you know? Like somebody was just fucking around online and was just like, let's see if anybody will actually go see this movie, you know?
Well, I want to see if they could pull it off, because like you'd be surprised at what some people can pull off. But I was watching, I was like, no, they didn't pull it off. They're like, hey, we got an idea for an evil tire. What do we do? Okay. And they just like came up with something. No spoiler words, but you know, there's it's not good. But so
I'll just take your word for that one. I don't think I really need to see it.
You're like, damn, I was gonna watch that tonight. So what's the inspiration for most of your stuff? Like, do you get ideas from like stuff that happens in your life? Do you get ideas that just pop in your head from watching movies, from reading a book? Is it a whole mix of stuff?
Anything, man. Like a lot of times it is music. If I'm just driving down the street, a certain song sometimes will give me an idea. Or like I was driving down the highway with my wife and I just saw a truck pulling this just ratty ass trailer behind it. And just the trailer alone just gave me an idea. I mean, I moved to West Virginia, and West Virginia alone, I mean, just can give you all kinds of ideas just driving around these backwood hollers and shit, you know? I mean, I haven't had so many good ideas. Yeah, it's fucking nuts, man. Since moving here, I'm telling you, like every road just gives you a new idea. We were out on a boat this past weekend and I got an idea. Like it's crazy. They just come to me all the time. So, and now it's just like I'm the kind of person that juggles stories anyways. It's really hard for me to focus on one story.
Okay.
So I'll have
you have a couple
3 to 5.
Time?
What's that? I'm sorry, I kind of froze
You have
up
a
for a
couple
second.
going at one time, and like you're working on several different stories.
Yeah, so that's what usually happens is I'll have like several stories going at one time until something really until something grabs my attention enough and pulls me in until you know what I mean until you're really drawn into a story enough that you're going to finish that one until the end. And that usually happens at some point. Like right now I'm working on a book called Kin of the Fallen, which is going to be a slasher story, and it's fucking violent. It's probably the most violent, brutal story I've ever written, and I'm at right around I'm almost at 40,000 words, and at this point I'm not working on anything else really. I mean that's the one I'm going to finish next. So I mean, and that one is just it's caught my attention enough now. I'm at the point where I'm really moving forward with it. So but usually, yeah, that's the problem is I have too many stories going at once until I can kind of narrow it down to one.
Yeah, I'm kind of OCD. I have to focus on one thing. Like I take a whole bunch of notes and I have to kind of narrow down what I want in this story. So I'm trying not to get too many confused because it might be like I'm off on one trend and I mention something like, oh wait, that's not in this story. So I don't know. For me, I have trouble doing that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I keep a lot of notes on my phone, especially
Yeah,
at
that's
night.
my.
I try to stop working at a certain time of the day, around like 5 p.m. or something. I'll really try to cut it off and spend time with my wife. So when she falls asleep and I'm just kind of like laying there in bed at night, a lot of times I'll play around on my phone and just kind of start taking notes and stuff. And I'll still wind up working, kind of late into the night, but on my phone. So I do a lot of note taking on the phone.
Okay, do you do that thing like I know some authors set aside a certain time? They're like, I need to start writing, and I need to write for this many hours, and that's going to be my segment for the day. And some people are more like free flowing, like whenever the spirit arises, I'll get as much out.
I kind of both. I try to be very I try to sit and write for a certain amount of time per day because I am a big believer in word count, like not necessarily hitting a certain word count, but I'm a believer that if you get some words in per day, it's just simple math. I mean, if you're trying to write a book and you write some words per day, they're going to add up and you're going to have a written book, you know what I mean, a finished book at the end of the, 3 4 months. If you write something every single day, if you can get yourself to write 500 words a day, 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day, that's going to add up to at least a novella, a novel, at a certain point in time. So I am a believer in writing something every single day. So at one point when I can really focus and I don't have anything else that I'm working on, if I didn't have a part-time job right now, because there was a point where I was writing kind of full-time, at that point I'd say my average was about 5,000 words a day. But I need to really be able to just sit and focus on just writing. So, and that doesn't happen all that often. So I'd say right now I'm closer to like 1,000.
Background, like documentaries or music or anything, or you need silence?
I like to put on like movie scores, but horror movie scores.
Okay.
So I have like a Spotify playlist where I just packed it with a bunch of horror movie scores, and I'll put that on. But it has to be like at a low volume. It can't be distracting.
Right.
I can't have like music with words because I'll just end up singing along and shit, and I won't get it done. And same thing with movies. Like I can write with stuff playing in the background, but it takes my focus away a lot. So I won't get as much done if I have like a movie playing or a TV show or something like that. I'll end up watching it instead. So
I find go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of need silence. I feel like everything distracts me. Like even if I put on something like Neurosis, something that's like very slow, very few words, or no words, it still kind of distracts me. And the thing is, I go around, so it's like it could be like a gloomy or silent scene. That could be like a bright daylight scene. It's like that soundtrack isn't appropriate for every scene. So for me, it doesn't work because I feel like I kind of have to immerse myself in the writing, like almost like I am the character doing stuff. I write a lot in the first person too, so it's like what's hitting you, what you're experiencing, and it's kind of hard to do that when you're hearing something else completely different in the background.
Yeah, that's true. Because yesterday I was writing like this creepy ass scene at a lake, kind of in the forest, and there's like this '80s synth, kind of music on. It was like from like John Carpenter's The Thing or something, and
Right,
I was
right.
like, all right, cut that shit off. Like that's totally taking me out of the scene. So
It's funny
definitely,
how
yeah,
John Carpenter makes that stuff work, like the Halloween theme and stuff like that. And something that wouldn't be creepy now is because it's associated with Halloween.
yeah, exactly.
So do you have a specific author or specific books or specific music that kind of like puts you in that mood and that mindset?
um, well, a lot of the music that I'll listen to if I'm like I said, okay, so I can't listen to music with lyrics when I'm writing, but if I'm out walking or if I'm driving and stuff like that, if I'm gonna be writing horror, I'll listen to just a mixture of like rock music and stuff. Probably early 2000s kind of rock. I like Seether and I like a lot of the bands from back then. Back with Creed and Godsmack and all that kind of stuff like that. I'll probably put on kind of a mix of that. Um, so rock kind of sets the mood for me, kind of puts me in the mindset for it. As far as reading books, I like right now I've always been into Bentley Little. Bentley Little is a big inspiration for me.
Okay.
Um, he's kind of my Stephen King. I do like Stephen King. I respect the hell out of the man. I don't read a lot of Stephen King. To me, growing up, Bentley Little was kind of like my Stephen King. He's just the one I stumbled upon. So I still read a lot of Bentley Little. I've kind of newly discovered, like over the last probably 5 years, Richard Lehman, Brian Keene. So those are the authors and stuff that I'm reading now a lot more of. So yeah, those are kind of my go-to authors right now for the most part. That
What
kind
about
of
any of the classics like Richard Matheson or like Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft or anything like that?
I honestly don't read a lot of the classics. I like Ray Bradbury and Shirley Jackson. I have some of their compilation kind of books and collections and stuff like that, but I really don't read like Lovecraft. I need to. To be honest, I'm a little intimidated by Lovecraft. Every time I pick it up, I'm like, where do I even begin? In
Right.
fact, at the last Scares That Care, I had a talk with Mary San Giovanni about it because she's a big Lovecraft and cosmic horror fan, and she
Right.
writes a lot of it herself. And we were actually talking about that, and I was, talking to her about this exact thing, like how I get intimidated when I look at all his work, and that, because Lovecraft's fucking collection books are massive, and you
Right.
just kind of open it up, and you're like, damn, where do I even start with all this, the mythos and all that shit? So
Well,
I'd like to. At some point, I'll get into it.
yeah.
So
No, I'm a
I,
big Lovecraft fan. I think that like his writing might be a little bit stiff for the modern audience, but I think that his ideas are brilliant.
yeah,
Whereas I think like kind of the opposite with Stephen King. Like he has a very nice, smooth way of communicating, but I don't think his ideas are strong.
yeah. And that's where, to me, I liked Bentley Little. Have you read Bentley Little
No,
before?
I haven't.
And some people are kind of Bentley Little. A lot of times, and I've heard people say this about Stephen King too. A lot of times, he doesn't stick the landing. Kind of, there'll be a lot of build
Yeah.
up, and some of the endings are a little bit, but I love his body of work. I mean, there aren't many authors that I can say almost everything that I've read of theirs I loved. And Bentley Little's books growing up, his ideas are just fucking wild. Like I would say Bentley Little's to me is one of the earlier extreme horror authors. Not as extreme as some of the shit that I'm writing now, or that some of the guys like Daniel Volpe and Aaron Beauregard and Roland Bursey, and definitely not Ed Lee and stuff like that. Not that they're writing, but some of the shit he writes is just wacky, man. Like in this book, The Resort, I just remember there was this scene where like there's these guys, their wives are all chained up at the end of this fence, and they're just driving golf balls at their naked wives and shit at the end of this driving range. And I was just reading this like, what the fuck? Like, where'd this even come from? Like, some of this shit was just wild, and it's just in a normal trade paperback that you'd buy at the store. You know what I mean? So, I mean, to me, that was just like out there. Or I was like 14 or 15 when I read, I think it was Dominion. It's my first Bentley Little book. And this kid moves to this small town, and I just remember there's this one scene in there where his mom is at this big ass party in a vineyard, and all of a sudden there's this big orgy, and he sees his mom riding this guy's face in this field. It's just big orgy, all these naked people. And for me, I'm like 14, and I'm like, fuck yeah, like this can be in a normal book. Like I could write this shit. So off I went to, start writing erotica and extreme horror. And so,
it seems like it's changed a lot over time. Like I'm 49. I remember, like, as a kid, as a teenager, what was kind of pushing the boundaries in, is super mild by today's standards. Like, things just keep evolving to get, like, more extreme and more extreme.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, some of the shit that's coming out now, especially like with godless.com up and stuff, and the stuff that's coming out of Godless, yeah, there's definitely, I mean, without any, because Amazon still filters their stuff and takes a lot of books down and stuff, and that's kind of what Godless prides itself on, is not taking anything down. So
one thing that like my video editor guy pointed out to me, that when you tag with certain things like horror on Instagram, they actually they don't censor it, but they like limit the people they can, like, they shadow ban it.
Oh, yeah. All my tags have horror in them.
I know.
Right, nobody's seeing my shit. I have like fucking 28 tags that are all like horror related.
Yeah. I was like, why all of a sudden are these getting fewer views? And apparently that's it. Like, because they're so concerned. Like, it seems lately that's happening more and more. Like, kind of these, like, freer platforms, or the ones that you thought were freer platforms, like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and stuff. They're like, wait a minute, we don't like that. And then all of a sudden you're not allowed to put it up. Like, I heard of a meme on Facebook where it's like, every girl loves getting swept off her feet and ushered into a car until she ends up in the trunk. I thought it was a pretty obvious joke, but I got banned from Facebook for 2 weeks.
I always wonder about that, because I have a YouTube show also where it's called First Chapter Freakshow, where I read the beginnings of other authors' books. I mean, the whole point of it is I just read like the first chapter or two of each episode. I read the first chapter or two of a different author's book. It's all horror, but I feel like it's like nobody really sees it. I think I'm up to probably around 300 subscribers or something like that right now. And I think I have 53 episodes, 55, something like that. So I've been doing it for probably a little over a year now or something like that. And it just seems like it's so...
podcast you do?
What's that?
It's a podcast you do?
No, it's just YouTube. I just do First Chapter Freakshow. It has nothing to do with like the podcast that I'm doing with the other guys.
Okay.
It's just me. It's just on YouTube. I don't upload it to any of the podcast sites or anything. I've thought about it, but it's
Red, right? That's the podcast you're doing?
Yeah, Written in Red is the podcast with the other guys. So, and I've always felt like with YouTube, I don't know if like the tags I'm using and stuff like that, if it's like stopping it, it from being seen. Maybe YouTube might be not liking the hashtags that I'm using and stuff with all the horror related stuff. Yeah. I don't know.
It changes every week too, so you never know what their current thing that they hate or like or whatever is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the new thing to try and master is TikTok. God.
You gotta do those little dances where you wear like a pink tutu, and that'll probably bring you more viewers.
I use TikTok like a dad. I just get on there and like talk for 2 minutes and get off.
But to be graphic horror.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing I've noticed that I really like, have you ever read the book Lucifer's Hammer? It's about a giant meteor that hits the earth and everything goes apocalyptic overnight, and it's a really good story. But the reason I bring that up is because they kind of build up the backstory first. So, like, the main characters, you see what they're doing before the meteor hits, and then the meteor hits and all goes to shit, and they're like marauding bands, like kind of The Walking Dead, where they're like eating people and killing people and whatever. But you feel more intensely for the characters because you knew what their lives were before all this transition.
Yeah.
And I noticed with like a lot of modern stuff, they're like too quick to get to the point. They're like, immediately he's cutting the guy's throat or whatever, and you're like, well, the guy whose throat he's cutting, was he a cool guy? You don't
Yeah,
do anything for him.
yeah. Characterization is definitely lacking in a lot of books now too. Yeah, for sure.
Like that's one thing I like that Stephen King does is he has that backstory to people. You know, do you feel like that's an inspiration? Is that something that you try to do? Like
Uh,
fill in
yeah,
the story?
definitely, because and that's one thing that I've heard a lot of is that people like my characterization. It's one
Okay.
of the I remember I actually started out writing screenplays before I was writing books. And when I lived in Chicago, I was doing security for Tiffany's, the jeweler, back in the day. And there was a party one night, and I can't remember the name of the director, but he was a pretty big director of one of the famous romantic comedies that was out in the theater at the time. I honestly don't remember. And I had written a romantic comedy screenplay, and I asked when he was there at the party, I did the thing you're not really supposed to do when you work for a company, but I approached him, was like, hey man, if I give you a script, would you read over it? He gave me his email address. I sent it to him, and he was nice enough to at least give me some notes back. He said, hey, it was pretty funny, but your characterization sucks. He said it would have been a lot more. It would have been a lot more funny if I gave a shit about either of the characters. Like it was like that kind of cruel, harsh reality that you need to
Brutal
hear
makes you better.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, and from that point, I was like, damn, he's absolutely right. You know what I mean? Like, it hurt, it stung a little, but I took that and I was just like, damn, that's what I needed to hear at that time. And since then, I've always tried to make the characters relatable. And it drives me nuts sometimes when I read a book and I just don't care about. And it happens with movies too. How many times are you watching a movie and you're just like, I don't give a shit whether this character lives or dies. Like
Way
I
too
don't feel
often
anything.
these days. Yeah.
Like, either I don't hate them enough to want them to die, or I don't love them enough to care if they die. Like, I don't really give a shit one way or the other. Like, I don't feel anything for them at all. So, and that happens a lot in the movies, and it happens a lot in books. So I try my best to at least have enough characterization in there that if somebody gets whacked, you give a shit. you know
Yeah,
so
I remember reading it was they were talking about Paul Verhoeven, which I think he's an awesome director. He did RoboCop and Starship Troopers, and he did Total Recall. And I remember he's talking about with RoboCop. He's like, he wanted you to care about the main character, and it's a 2-hour movie, so he didn't have time to build up like a big backlog for the character. So he
yeah,
had him really brutally kill. Like he's like it's so like the scene is so horrific. You feel for the guy when he becomes RoboCop and starts enacting vengeance. I thought that was a clever idea.
yeah. And it's funny because I hear people all the time say, like, yeah, well, it's a short story, I didn't have time to do that. And I'm like, no, that's not an excuse, man. All it takes is a couple of sentences. All you got to say, I mean, it could be something
Just the
as
right
simple.
words. Yeah.
It could be as simple as saying that your main character gave up going to college and playing professional baseball because the parents died and he wanted to look after his younger sister. I mean,
Yeah.
that tells you in a couple of sentences that how selfless he is, that he, gave up a career in fucking baseball to take care of his little sister. You know what I mean? So now that the zombie apocalypse is kicking off,
Right.
you at least know he's a nice guy and he's selfless, and you know what I mean? Like, and that took 2 sentences to do it. So, I mean,
Yeah,
just
the right words tell you a lot more than you would think. You don't need a whole paragraph. I agree with
yeah,
that 100%.
yeah.
So I
So
noticed like when I write I wrote a period piece like a guy is in the trenches in World War I, and he's like writing back to his fiance and he goes crazy, and I remember I put that out and people were like, it doesn't strike me as the way a person of that era would write. I was like, so I got called out on it. So I was like, what should I do? They're like, why don't you research some letters from that era so you can see how people talked back in the 1930s? And so I did, and I think that really strengthened the story. Have you run into that at all?
uh man, I'm trying to think. I feel like I have, but nothing's coming to mind fast enough, like, for me to be able to answer that question.
or even research into like something current. Like in one of my stories, is it's an apocalypse and the guy's breaking into gas stations. So I had to go to gas stations and see how you turn on the pumps.
That's a good point, though. No. Yeah, no, but it's something that I worry about all the time. Like it's something that kind of stuff scares the shit out of me because
Right.
you never know because people will pick it apart.
Oh, they'll call you out. They'll call you out.
Oh,
Percent.
definitely. Yeah, they definitely will. In fact, in my most recent book, Faces of Beth, it's a possession story, but it also has a lot to do with mental illness. And the mental illness that's in it, I don't want to say exactly what it is because it's kind of part of the twist. You can kind of get it from the title and the cover and stuff, but it's still a bit of a twist that people aren't picking up on. So I don't really want to give it away. But I've been asked in interviews, and I just did a Q&A not too long ago for people who'd read the book, and I was asked a lot about it and stuff, and I did research it.
Okay.
So I did do some research on it. The good thing was there's not a whole lot of concrete information about it because it's one of those mental illnesses where it kind of varies. There's different degrees.
Right.
There's different experiences. There's a lot of different doctors actually that fight and argue over it. So and have varying opinions on it. So,
Well, you
but
know, a
it's
lot of stuff is kind of misdiagnosed. It like takes them like
exactly
50 years for them to go. Actually, it's not what you think it is. It's just instead.
right. And it scared the shit out of me writing it because that's what I told my wife. I said, "Man, I'm scared that somebody's going to read this who has it or who's dealt with it and go, he's full of shit." You know what I mean? Or he's not being sympathetic enough or empathetic enough, you know? And that's the kind of stuff that worries me is that I'm just going to upset somebody because in fact, I take it back. Yes, I did have that happen to me once. I have a story called Redgrave that's a military horror. And in it, I wrote it from a female character's point of view in first person about a female character who's trying to kind of prove herself in a man's military world, you know. So she volunteers to stay overnight and guard a guy who's been put in like kind of like solitary confinement. And it's in this old building up in Alaska. And she's alone, but there's one other guy in the building with her, but he's upstairs. And she's unarmed. She only has like a mag light flashlight, a bulletproof vest, and a big walkie-talkie. So in the story, she's guarding this guy who's kind of like a psychopath. He's locked up in this confinement cell. So somebody read it and they told me that would never happen. I'm military or I'm ex-military. That would never happen. They would never have somebody unarmed watching an inmate. And I said, wrong, because it happened to me. I actually was her. I did that post. I was ex-military, Air Force Security Forces. I volunteered to work that exact post. So I know for a fact that it happens because I did it. So,
Right.
I mean, it's one of those things that, like, especially when it comes to military, you know, nothing is blanket across all militaries. I mean, all branches of the military, not even across all different bases. I mean, so, but people will still, you know, rake you over the coals. They'll still try to pick it apart and, you know, because of their experience being a little bit different. So it does happen.
Maybe you gotta kind of specify. Like, there's one story I wrote where it's like a ship that's been ripped apart and everyone's dead. There's a character in it, and he's kind of like swimming through, you know, the atmosphere or whatever. People are like, you like one guy was like, you can't swim in space. I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of atmosphere left inside. It has a hole ripped in it, but the whole thing is not a vacuum. But yeah, people argue to death. So I was like, maybe I should have mentioned that beforehand.
Some people have way too much time on their hands. So
It's true. There's always a critic for everything. I mean, that's one thing I've learned. I'm an artist. I'm a tattoo artist. I own a shop, and I'm a writer. And people love to tear you down. So,
oh, yeah.
you know, even if you have like 10 fans, there's always that one guy. You know, you could have 100 fans. There's two guys. You know, yeah. They always pull you down. But so what are you working on right now? Like, what are the projects you're excited about?
Well, right now, there's the ones I'm working on. I can't say much about, which sucks. It always happens that way. So, Kin of the Fallen is the one I'm working on now that I said was a slasher. It's very, very violent. Probably the most brutal book I've ever written.
Right.
But I can't say much about it. I'm just not ready to give anything away on it yet. And I don't have a deadline for it yet, so I don't know exactly when it's coming out, but I'd say I'm probably at least a third of the way into it. And then there's a project I'm working on with another author that I can't say anything about.
So lots of stuff coming up. People should just watch your shit.
Yeah,
That'd be it.
yeah. I'm working on a prequel to Scalp, which is that Parasite head lice book.
Right.
So I'm working on the prequel to that one. I don't. That's about it right now that I'm really kind of focusing on. So,
has Hollywood come shopping around your characters or your stories or anything like that?
No, man. I wish they would.
You have a lot of people like Mike Mignola who does Hellboy.
Yeah.
I think he's an awesome artist and I think he's a good writer. But after he got a little bit of that Hollywood money, he stopped doing nearly as much. Like a lot of the Hellboys that come out now, he doesn't draw it anymore. He like writes some of them. It's like, so maybe being hungry helps. Helps you to get more stuff out there. Maybe if you get too much success, you kind of fall back and you end up doing all the minutia.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I would love to just be able to get these stories out of my head and have somebody put them on film. That'd be badass.
So what do you do? Like, what's the biggest way that you get them out to your audience, to your readers?
I'm going to be honest. I suck at advertising, man. I think a lot of us do. We're all trying to figure this shit out. So, but I mean, most of my time is spent on Facebook, and I'm on all the social media sites. I do have a newsletter. It's pretty young. I don't have that many subscribers. It's on Substack. Yeah, I mean, when I bring out a new book, I pretty much market it out to everybody through social media and through newsletter. I need to get better at doing the big new release blasts and all that kind of shit like that. But when I have books come out, I market it out to all the social media sites and then promote it as, I'll sell the signed books and stuff like that from home.
Yeah, I just interviewed Aaron Rearguard. He was talking about how like he gives out a lot of swag. Like you can buy signed books from him. And when I'll send to you, there'll be like a bookmark included or a sticker included. Have you tried that?
Yeah, not like to that degree. He and Daniel are fucking beasts when it comes to that kind of shit. They got that down pat.
He's on it.
Yeah, they're both beasts when it comes to doing the swag and the packages and stuff with their paperbacks and hardcovers. Actually, they both got their websites up and stuff. I am working on a website, but part of the website is very dedicated to that new book I'm working on. So I'm not going to release the website until I have everything ready for that book, because I want it to come out around the same time as the book. So, but yeah, no, when I have books come out, I do sell signed paperbacks, and at some point I will try to get it up on the big cartel site and stuff like they have going on.
So what's your experience been so far with like publishers and agents?
I don't, I honestly haven't reached out. I was published one time with a very small publisher, just one of the small publishing houses. It was a bad experience for me. This was back before. Yeah, and this was back before I was even Carver Pike. This is back before I was even Chris Genovese. I was using my real name, just writing fantasy. I didn't know much about social media, so I wasn't selling much. I was, just kind of getting started out. And to be honest, I got fucked over real bad by the publishing company. They let me go on a Friday night because sales were low, pulled my book by Saturday morning. Screwed me over big time. I had a marketing newsletter supposed to come out Saturday morning that I'd pushed real hard to get into.
Right.
And just really screwed me over. I mean, it was a breach of contract and everything, and just left a real sour taste in my mouth. So for a long time, I just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it on my own. And I kind of have ever since. I'm not saying I wouldn't go with a publisher. I just haven't really reached out to anybody. I've just kind of been doing my own thing. So, and since then, that's kind of how it's been. I haven't reached out to an agent or a publisher since about 2015. So,
yeah, there's a lot of people I talked to recently that are saying that self-publishing is kind of the way to go. Like, maybe I made a mistake. Like everything that I put out, I'm like, I should have a publisher put it out. And some of the publishers, they keep all the money. They change stuff in the contract. It's not a good experience.
Yeah, well, I think it's important also to. I mean, Brian Keene preaches this a lot. He has an excellent newsletter if you haven't subscribed to it. but he's talked a lot about diversifying too, being careful not to put all your eggs in one basket with one publisher. Don't You got to be careful not to put all your books into one publisher just for, I mean, he has many things that he says, but I think one of the points that I've taken from that is just, you've seen recently a lot of publishers have kind of closed their doors. There's been some drama with certain publishers and things like that. And imagine if all you had, some of these authors have had, 5, 6 books with all their books with one publisher. When that publisher closes their door or decides not to pay them or something happens, you're fucked, man. Like, that's a scary thought.
I know Amazon used to have Novel Tracker on there, like it was an app, and you could see how many copies of your book sold. And I remember asking one publisher, I was like, "Why does it sell way more copies than you claim when you pay me?" They're like, "Oh, well, it must be European or something, and we haven't gotten the results yet." And then Amazon canceled Novel Tracker, so you're not even allowed to see how many copies of your stuff sell. So there's a lot of people playing real dirty out there.
That's the other part of it. I mean, you don't know who's playing legit and dirty. I mean, there are some awesome publishers out there, and I know quite a few of them out there doing the right thing, and I'm friends with quite a few of them. So I mean, I know there's some really good ones out there. Just
Can you name some so that
there are some bad ones out there. I mean, I know it seems like the Death's Head Press guys are really doing a good job. They seem to really know what they're doing. I mean, Daniel seems to really like D&T. Erie River, I like. Erie River seems to be all right. Candice Nola just signed with them, and she's a good friend of mine. I actually talked to Michelle over there a while back, but I mean, I know there's some out there that seem to be really legit, and they're trying. You know what I mean? They're doing right by their authors, and they're really trying to do the right thing out there.
I give a shout out to my publisher, Crossroad Press. I think they're awesome.
Yeah,
well, that's
another one.
3 other publishers, and they're all nightmares. Like one had get a lawyer involved just to get my rights back because he kept violating my contract. What's your experience been with editors so far?
I have a very different approach than most people do. I work with a group of people that I've worked with for a long time, since almost 2015.
Read your stuff and give you some feedback on it.
Yeah, so I have a group of very dedicated readers slash editors who have kind of done both, and that I've worked with for a long time. They're not really people that you can hire. They're just like friends who I've worked with for a long time, and they've picked apart all of my books since the beginning, and they do a really good job of tearing me up and helping me pick it apart and put it back together. So it's a little bit different. I don't have like one editor that I send everything to. I have a group of people that I work with, and it goes through all of them. I do a couple rounds of editing myself, then it goes through all of them back to me to do another round. And so because I've had an experience with an editor, kind of the same as with a publisher. I had an editor that had me take stuff out of a book that I didn't necessarily agree with. Now, you know what I mean? Like the book, it changed the book drastically because I was young and not, didn't really know what I was doing. And again, another sour kind of taste in my mouth of, again, there are great editors out there, and then you do have to still be careful. I mean,
no, not every around. I really like my editor. I have called Monger. I think he's a really good editor, but I went through a bunch of editors before that, and a lot of them, they seem like frustrated writers, and they want to rewrite your story the way they would write it. They're not worried about your voice or your concepts or anything like that. It's more like, yeah, I'm going to make this mine. I don't know. That's been my experience to know Carl, and I thought Carl was awesome.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen that quite a bit. And also, you got to remember that not everybody with a college degree in English is an editor. I mean, it takes a special skill set to be an editor. Not everybody who can read English is necessarily capable of editing a book. So,
or they might even get the concept. I remember one editor edited my book, and it was going in a different direction than what I intended. So I'm reading it, and I'm like, "What are you trying to do?" And the editor even told me they didn't know where I was going with this. It's like, this is not the person for me.
Yeah, definitely. I've read books by people. I've read books that I know were edited by certain people, and I'm just like, no. Like that's, I mean,
well, sounded like the editor. They didn't sound like the author.
Yeah, or it just was badly edited. You know what I mean? I'm reading it and I'm just like, that should not be that way. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that within the first chapter that shouldn't be there. you know what I mean? So
Have you tried agents at all?
have I tried agents?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I've thought about it a lot recently. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about publishers, agents. Trying again, trying to get my foot in the door somewhere. I go back and forth with it a lot, especially with the whole pit mad thing that's on Twitter. You know what that is, right?
No, no, I'm not familiar.
On Twitter, they have, I think it's once a quarter they open it up. It's called Pit Mad, and I think Pit Dark maybe is the other thing. You do like a hashtag pitch mad or pit mad. I got to look it up and see exactly. I haven't actually done it, but I've seen it. And if you use that hashtag and put in your pitch for your book, then if agents are looking for those pitches that day, they know everybody's doing it on that day, so they're looking for that hashtag. If they like your post or heart it or whatever on Twitter, then that means they want to actually read your manuscript or whatever. So then you get in touch with them and send it to them. And it's like it's kind of a streamlined way, I guess, of getting in touch with agents through Twitter. So, and it's set up specifically for that. So it's done, I think, every quarter. And I thought about doing it with Scalp because that's my parasitic head lice story. And I had an awesome, very short, I always have a really hard time coming up with blurbs, and especially short enough ones for Twitter. I mean, so I was like, man, I came up with the perfect one for Twitter for Scalp. And I was going to do that one, and then I decided not to. I was like, do I really want an agent? Like, I go back and forth with that too. You know what I mean? It's like, but, nowadays you kind of almost need an agent to be able to get to these streaming sites like Netflix and Prime and all these. So,
Right. Well, it seems like a mixed bag. Like big publishers like Tor, like big companies like Netflix and like Amazon Prime, they won't even look at your stuff without an agent. But when you hire an agent, they get a portion of your sales. So if you don't sell to somebody really big, you're just losing money. So it's a mixed bag. I had one guy, he helped inspire me to like really start getting my writing out there. Like I had brain cancer and I lost my wife in hit and run, and I kind of slacked on stuff, and he really fired me up. And then he had an agent, and I remember pitching it to my agent, and the agent they don't do much. They didn't do much for him. Like he eventually gave up writing because it didn't really help him.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and I've heard some good and bad stories about agents, but for the most part, if they don't sell it, then you don't pay them, right?
I think agents are all different. Like I don't currently have an agent, and I can't speak for what they do, but I think that they get like a certain percentage of your sales, and then after a while they'll just drop you if you're not like, selling to like big corporations and making them money.
The only time I actually went back and forth with an agent was a really long time ago. I met Patricia Cornwell, the mystery thriller writer.
Yeah.
I met her in person. She was really cool. And she actually gave me her card for her agent and said to get in touch with her agent. But back then I was so young and so new, I wasn't ready. The only book I had out was like a young adult book. It was really stupid. But I mean, what are you going to do? It's the only thing I had out, and it was, I had to shoot my shot. So I was like, all right, I got in touch with her agent with a fucking dumb book that was not ready, and it wasn't what her agent would have wanted to represent anyways. But I tried, and the agent wanted nothing to do with it. It was really dumb. And then I tried, I wrote, actually, I was working on a horror story. So I was like, all right, let me try this one. And then the agent basically told me that she was no longer accepting like fiction. Something like, it's like either she wasn't, or she just wanted nothing to do with me. I don't know. But this was way back though, before I even started. I mean, this is, I think, before I was even writing screenplays. So I went through that whole, I was writing books, then switched to screenplays and went back to books. So.
Well, it seems like one person's, I mean, it's a cliche, one person's trash does another person's treasure. Like, it's hugely subjective. And a lot of artists that have made it, like, they were told that they were crap for the longest time, and then all of a sudden somebody liked their stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that book,
musicians, happens to artists, happens to writers, all the time.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling, right? Harry Potter was in that slush pile for a while, so.
And now she's the richest woman in the UK.
Crazy.
One of the richest women in the world,
It's nuts, man.
How can people get a hold of you?
to get a hold of me, really, I'm everywhere as Carver Pike. So, I mean, I'm mostly on Facebook. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me, or carverpike@gmail.com if you want something signed from me, because I pretty much just have everything here at the house. But I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere, just as Carver Pike. And I'd love it if you check out my YouTube show, First Chapter Freakshow. I'm on there as Carver Pike as well. And yeah, check us out on Written and Read too, the podcast.